So let me set the scene for you. There's 1 month left until the World Championship qualifiers and you still don't have your invite. Not to mention, you only have about $100 to $150 to work with to come up with a deck to actually have a fighting chance. Or there's a nationals taking place in your country in Europe, in Central America, South America, Australia, wherever there are nationals taking place, and you want to build something that you actually have a fighting chance without breaking the bank. Well, in this video, I'm going to be covering 5 decks that are not only affordable, but competitive as well. Let's get into it. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 competitive budget decks for the May 2019 format. We now have an idea of what the format is shaping up to going into the WCQ season. So today I wanted to go ahead and share with you what strategies you can play for about $100 to $150 for the main and extra deck and actually have a competitively viable chance of topping or winning these events. Now, obviously budgets are completely subjective and $100 to $150 may seem like a lot, but when the entire Danger Core is like $300 to $400 for 9 cards, or a copy of Phantazmay is sitting at like, what, $105 US? Yeah, relatively speaking, these decks are extremely budget, extremely affordable, and are definitely viable options. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Kicking things off with number 5, I went ahead with Dinosaur. Yes, Dinosaur has actually made a very big resurgence now that Miscellaneousaurus has moved off of the Forbidden and Limited list back to 3 copies. Miscellaneousaurus, while not like the key focal point of the deck, gave the deck a lot of resilience in protecting your board from activated effects. And dinosaurs have always been a very good rogue contender. I mean, you've got 3 copies of Oviraptor, which pretty much search your entire deck, Fossil Dig to back that up. You've got stuff like Dogoron, which is a search target, which being a kaiju that's searchable through Oviraptor to get rid of your opponent's threats is pretty powerful. Dino Wrestler Pancratops is also a dinosaur, meaning that's searchable through Oviraptor as well, so that's a boon that dinosaurs have that other decks that play Pancratops can take advantage of. And not to mention, you have a big, incredible boss monster in Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. Ultimate Conductor Tyranno can actually put in a lot of work in this current format because it's massive. It can flip cards face down, preventing your opponent's link plays. It can send them to the graveyard so it bypasses certain destruction protections. Like, there's just so many benefits to a card like Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. Not to mention, Lost World is a very powerful card because not only does it help in your Sky Striker matchup, giving your opponent a token, so that way it pretty much shuts off all of their Sky Striker cards since they now control a monster in the main monster zone, but against a deck like Mystic Mindburn, it gives them a monster to help you break your lock, so that way you can keep activating effects and not succumb to Mind's nasty side effects. So it's a very good deck. Obviously it's still in the rogue contender, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys a list of a deck that actually managed to get first place at a regional this past weekend, and it's something that you can definitely experiment with, and that's why I went ahead and gave Dinosaur my number 5 slot. But coming in at number 4, we have a deck that has proven itself to be one of the top tier budget contenders for the past several months now and still manages to do well even to this very day. Pendulum Magician. Now, Pendulum Magician has a lot of good things going for it. I mean, it's a combo deck, and Pendulum Magician being a combo deck is actually one of the very few decks that doesn't really care about hand traps too much. Not only do you not have to play them, but also plays very well around a lot of them. I think Ghost Ogre kind of being like the only exception to that. Pendulum Magician really doesn't care. It doesn't care about Ash Blossom. Valor can like kind of hurt, but for the most part, you're just going to play through all that and set up your board of multiple negations. The nice thing about this deck is that a majority of the cards came out in a single set, so the deck is very inexpensive. Master Cerberus has come down in price now, so it is much more affordable now that the Pendulum hype has kind of died down after the Endymion structure deck. But the cool thing about Pendulum Magician is there isn't exactly one way to play it. I mean, there's so many different like pendulum based engines. Like, you've got the Mythical Beast engine, you've got the Endymion engine, you've got the Dark Worm engine. Like, there's so many different components here, but they're all incredibly affordable that you can pick and choose which ones you like the best, and that's the deck that you can decide to play. Even when you look at the extra deck, like, there isn't really anything too expensive here. Yeah, if you forego something like Borrelsword Dragon, you lose your OTK potential, but the deck can actually OTK very well on its own, regardless of not not if you have Dinosaur Dragon. You've got such a huge boon in the pendulum summoning mechanic that you can just go in and completely decimate your opponent with one fell swoop. So for all these reasons, the fact that the deck has managed to top YCS after YCS for the past several months, and not to mention too, I'm going to show you not only a normal pendulum list, but also an Endymion list that top 16 the Dutch National this past weekend. For all those aforementioned reasons, that's why I gave Pendulum the number 4 slot. Now coming in at number 3, we have a deck that I actually did not anticipate would be going on this list, and that's Orca. Now, I know you might be thinking to yourself, Simo, how is Orca a budget deck? Well, if you go ahead and look at this list that actually top 16 the ARG here in Springfield this past weekend, this deck is actually incredibly affordable. I think the most expensive parts of the Orca deck itself are the danger cards and then the striker engine. But if you take those engines out of Orca, the deck is actually comprised of almost entirely like commons, rares, and super rares, and I think that's an incredible thing. Now, yes, you do have to get 2 copies of Dingirsu, which are probably the most expensive part of the deck, and Dinosaur Dragon is another card that you are gonna have to shell out a little bit of money for, but with those 3 cards out of the way, the rest of the deck is entirely inexpensive. Now, the dangers you might be thinking are kind of what makes Orca so good, but in the OCG, you have to think, they don't even have dangers, and Orca is the best deck in their format, so that just goes to show that the dangers are kind of more pretty much putting the deck over the top in the position that it already is by comparison, so they're not necessary. Some builds aren't even choosing to play the dangers as good as they may be, and even though that might not be optimal, that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily play the deck and see some success, as this list I have just showcased has proven. Orca has a ton of combo potential, being able to set up a board of 4 negates going first. You have the ability to break your opponent's boards going second and just kill them on the crackback. There's just a lot of good things that Orca has going for it, and honestly, there's so many different engines you can experiment with. Like, you can throw stuff in like instant fusion. Like, there's so many different ways and routes you can take with Orca that a lot of people are experimenting with and are also very affordable as well. So for those reasons, I had to give Orca my number 3 spot. But coming in at number 2, we have the undeniable budget king when it comes to not only my top 5 budget list, but just when it comes to budget decks in general, True Draco. The biggest reason why True Draco is on this list is not just because of the fact that it actually wins, but because of the fact that you don't need an extra deck to play True Draco, and as a result of that, you can spend your entire budget on your 40 card main deck, meaning you have more money per card to spend, and that way you don't feel too bad about it, because having an extra 15 cards to supplement your main deck can actually add up, especially when you need cards like Borosword or like Dingirsu or whatever the cards may be. That's where a lot of your expense is going to come from, but Draco does not have this issue, so you can afford to get the cards that you need and still have an incredibly powerful deck without taking anything away from the engine, because it doesn't need that extra deck. What I really like about Draco right now is not only the fact that it's been able to top YCSs in the past few months, with the format staying relatively constant with the top 5 decks being the same, but also the fact that with the newly encountered Mystic Mind Burn entering the metagame, Draco has the best Mystic Mind matchup of the entire metagame, and actually makes Draco even more viable, because the more people that you're going to see start playing Mystic Mind Burn, Draco is just an automatic win for that deck, because Draco can just completely punish it by using its built-in spell and trap removal in the True Draco spells. Like, that deck is just basically has no chance against Draco, and it's incredible to see that there's this nice hard counter in Draco at a deck that's at like the tier 2-ish status, but can also compete with the top tier meta decks. You've got some incredibly powerful monsters that generate tons of advantage, you've got tons of draw power in the deck, and then you can play whatever floodgates suit your fancy, and any other leftover budget you may have, you can spend on cards for your side deck. So I just love Draco, not only because it's actually a very viable option, but because it's probably the most inexpensive and budget-friendly option of the entire list. And is it objectively better than the other decks I've talked about? Not necessarily, but I hike it higher on this list solely due to the fact because of its affordability, and that's why I gave True Draco my number 2 slot. But that's gonna bring us to my number 1 competitive budget deck of the May 2019 format, and if you haven't already figured it out, I'm giving it to Salamandra. Now, Salamandra manages to maintain its number 1 spot on this list for a few reasons. First off, it is not only incredibly affordable because like 90% of the deck comes from just buying 3 copies of the Soul Burner structure deck, but the thing is, this deck probably has the most tops and or wins out of every other deck I've mentioned on this list. Now, obviously, those versions aren't necessarily really budget, but when you look at Salamandra list, if you take out the 3 copies of Phantazmay and then maybe like Impermanence, or I guess Signet Mining now that Dark Neostorm is legal, the rest of the deck is incredibly affordable. Even now, like Ash Blossom's been reprinted in that structure deck, Effect Veiler's been printed as a common like 500 times. Like, everything else comes in that structure deck, and you might need a couple things like Sunlight Wolf, but Sunlight Wolf's price has tanked significantly now because now that's had the chance to stable out. But here's a list that took 2nd place at the Honduras Nationals, and you can see here, there's no copies of Phantazmay, there's no copies of Impermanence. Sanctum might be a little bit expensive, but if Sanctum's the most expensive card you have to worry about, that's a really good thing considering how much all the rest of the cards could be in these top tier meta contenders. Salamandra just has so many good things going for it because it's super consistent, it relies on its single 1-card combo, which is very similar to that of Zodiac, and the fact that it's able to push out the same boards over and over consistently game after game is why the deck sees so much success. You can play a plethora of hand traps and you don't need that Phantazmay, Ash Blossom, and Veiler, and any other hand trap like DD Crow or even Ghost Spell. These cards are so affordable now that those are viable substitutes. You don't need those Phantazmays, you don't need those Impermanents, and if anything, this 2nd place deck profile proves that that is in fact the case. So if you're going to an event, if you're going to a regional or a national, whatever, and you have a strict budget, Salamandra is the deck I would go with, and that's why I have to give it the #1 slot. So guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about my top 5 list, and if there's any other suggestions you have for anyone who might be wanting to play on a budget, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.